My name is Gунхильд Hogенsen Gьёrff, and I'm professor of critical peace and conflict studies at the Center for Peace Studies at the UIT. On purpose. Two of Putin's closest men. Today, Norway has sent out 15 diplomats from the Russian embassy. They are now persona non grata, and they're considered to be intelligence officers rather than diplomats. Intelligence officers, why? Because they're clearly collecting information, and for the purposes of enhancing knowledge in Russia to potentially use against Norway. So that is a problem. What's some of the information that would be of interest to Russia? What's happening in the north. The north are what we call Nordområdena, or the high north. This area is of interest because of the close proximity to Russia, of course. We have our oil and gas installations here in this region. We have a lot of important economic installations within this region. It's a part of our security picture, the north, and it's a part of Russia's security picture. So they're very interested in this. Some of the most important military bases to Russia are also located in the north and on the other side of the border to Norway. There are a lot of countries that are increasing their intelligence operations around the world. Russia is undoubtedly one of them, and one of the core countries that is doing so, because we're so close to Russia, so that Russia constitutes one of the greater threats with regards to, one, gathering intelligence, but then using that intelligence in a way that could be used against us. The people who have been sent out of the country now are part of that more sort of traditional spy category. You know, they're intelligence officers. We've decided you're intelligence officers, so you've been working at the embassy under false pretenses. We had an alleged spy come to University of Tромsё. He took contact with me to begin with. He had completed a master's and wanted to rework a master's paper. So it's not like he was a leading researcher from anywhere, but he had legitimate degrees from Canada. He's what's called an illegalist, or an illegal, or potentially called an illegal because he's, not fully convicted, but one who uses a false identity to get into the country. He was unremarkable. If they're active, they're like illegal, and we're maybe try to build up networks to find out, well, what is happening in a particular region, what kind of either communities, aspects in the community, what are the politics, what can we take advantage of, that sort of stuff, and also collecting information. You could say, to begin with, it's because they have some of their largest and most important military bases located in the Arctic. So the protection of their own military spaces and sources of security, at least military security, is something they're very interested in. And this has been over a long period of time. So we've heard of something called bastion defense, for example. It's the notion that Russia would implement a type of a defense posture that it would, in a sense, take over a good chunk of the Barents Sea, and even take over territorial control in the north, meaning parts of North Norway, potentially, to ensure that there's a buffer zone between NATO or an aggressor and its military installations in Kola Peninsula, primarily, to provide that kind of protection. On the other hand, though, because of what's happening in Ukraine, Russia has also mobilized, it's supposed to mobilize as citizens in Russia to go fight in Ukraine, but has also used its soldiers that have been stationed in the Arctic and brought them down to Ukraine. So you have far fewer personnel who are actually working in the Kola Peninsula at the moment. So how worried they are about an actual threat to those military bases. I think realistically they're not that worried, because there is no discernible threat there. Fear is not the right response, but awareness is not inappropriate at this point in time, and being aware of the situation that we're in and not taking it for granted. We should check all Russians. Really, why? I mean, they're the most obvious ones, like if anyone's going to be extra watched, it's going to be someone with a Russian passport. That's not a part of the practices within this country. I think you really have to be in a completely different mindset to start having passport checks in every building on a university campus. That's just unthinkable at this point in time. No, I would not start hounding Russian citizens because of the fact that they're Russian. This guy came here as a Brazilian anyway. You know, should we check anyone who's non-allied? That was another thing that was suggested, you know, like, oh, well, we should extra check, you know, those who are outside of the NATO alliance. Really? Well, Anna Chapman, as you pointed out, she was British when she went to the United States. So, you know, she managed to do this long period of time kind of development of a personality and an identity where she was part of the Allies, you know, like she was a British citizen who was working in the United States. It's not a question of being scared or trying to increase threat perception in northern Norway and local communities, but rather just be aware that at the moment we're in a different sort of geopolitical situation where discussions about our own security and our role in that security, say in a total defense situation, should be a part of our regular discussion, and that we need to increase our awareness and not sort of take for granted that everything will be fine. We don't know about that, but there isn't this huge kind of threat perception either about Russia, and I don't think it's necessary. Relations are horrendous right now. And I don't imagine they're going to improve unless something happens in Ukraine. I don't even know where to go with that, because I don't know where it's going in Ukraine. That's Russia is not going to back down, because already Putin has said, you know, we've claimed all of this. I don't think he's going to be able to have it. He's not going to have control over Ukraine. I think it's very difficult for Russia to have control over Donbass in the longer term, even with these independent republics. I think it's also difficult for Ukraine to get them back. So there we are. I don't think diplomacy is relevant right now. There's things that are happening in the Arctic that we can't avoid, but at least have some sort of communication. We absolutely have to have communication with Russians, with Russian authorities in any case, at different levels. We have to have communications about the fisheries, about the environment, even to the point where I'm not even sure I would call it cooperation, but we need to share some sort of information. If we call that cooperation, fine. You know, we might need to share information that's important about what's happening with regards to climate change in the Arctic, or with regards to certain fish stocks and stuff. So there's a basic information we may still need to share, but not pretend that this is some sort of door opener to suddenly become, you know, that the war in Ukraine is going to stop because of that. It would just be there's necessary things we need to communicate on. So I hope we find ways in which that kind of communication can be maintained without it being interpreted as a green light that whatever the Russian government is doing is fine. It's not. So that's where we need to find a new balance, and I think that's where it's going to be for a long time.
And how to gain trust?
Yeah, that's going to take such a long time. That's going to really take a long time. You know.
What should Russia do to, again, be trusted?
Get the hell out of Ukraine.